as you're prompting it, so for people like us in this field, like we have experience. So it's like we kind of know what the output should look like or our desired output. But like, let's say you don't know about it and you start prompting it and you're reviewing the output and you're going to be learning this stuff along the way. I feel like it's almost like Google searching without less of the sponsorships, ads, all the fluff. Like you can get to answers, not to say you have to trust everything 100% of the time.
You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crow expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Thank you for joining me today on the Protect It All podcast. I've got my friend Blake here with me today. We are going to dive into all sorts of fun stuff. We don't have a script on this show. We kind of go wherever we go, but it'll be fun. We'll talk about some cool stuff. So Blake, why don't you introduce yourself? First of all, thank you for joining me today, and introduce yourself to the audience, and tell us a little bit about your background in cybersecurity and all the things.
Yeah. Well, first, great intro. Love it. So that's really great. My name is Blake Hoge. Been in the security GRC space for, I guess probably over 10 years now. I guess I'll just walk through my journey a little bit, but yeah, so out of, in school, did accounting, realized I did not like that very well. It was, very non-fun experience for me. And so midway through junior year, I switched over to management information systems. So was already kind of half committed already to accounting. So I figured I would just pick that up and run with it. So did the whole double major. Out of school, I joined Protiviti, which for those not familiar, it's a consulting firm. So not a big four, not your typical EY, Deloitte, those sorts of things. So, but joined Protiviti, really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life at the time. I was told this is going to be basically like, audit, and, really had no idea what that entailed. But, out of school, started doing the audit stuff. It was pretty interesting and eye-opening because got a lot of exposure to a lot of different industries. It was a lot of banking, credit unions, financial services, all those types of things. And then oil and gas. What was really cool about it and was, I guess, a humbling experience was did a lot of traveling at the time. So that was pretty fun, as a, young 20-year-old, get to travel to different cities and see different clients and interact with different teammates was pretty fun and exciting. But, it wasn't, it didn't feel, it felt like, what is the saying? Like, mastery of, jack of all, mastery of none. So I kind of really got good about showing up and being like the subject matter expert in any situation where it's like, oh, Blake here is our, senior, and he knows how to do this audit from start to finish. Meanwhile, you were just like a warm body that just got pulled onto the project. So for me, that was, a little hard to kind of understand like my purpose and where I was going with it. Along the way, I made a really good friend through Protiviti, and he was actually kind of my gateway into the tech space. So he was working at Protiviti as well, got pulled into Salesforce as a customer or as an auditor, got hired, and is probably within a few months he called me. He's like, "Hey, we have a role on my team. Are you interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. What does this role look like?" And that role was kind of the entryway into the governance, risk, and compliance, GRC space. And it was very specifically looking at third-party risk management and doing for Salesforce at the time was doing like our first-party data centers and call centers and supporting our security and compliance posture globally, which was, at the time, I didn't really even understand what I was getting myself into, but it was exciting once I got over there. I spent about 5 years there at Salesforce, and again, got into the first party data center. So we did a lot of security on-site assessments. This was like all pre-COVID, right? And, we would go to all your main data center providers, do security walkthroughs, looking at, all the lines of physical security, getting into a data center, looking at their processes, their controls, you name it. Basically, any way that could be basically penetrating into a data center, we were kind of looking at it, assessing it, providing feedback, findings, recommendations, all those sorts of things, which was really cool. I know, Aaron, you spent a lot of time in OT, so you can definitely relate to that. And then we also did a lot of the call centers. So same thing, kind of on the opposite end. All these big companies have all these call centers globally, kind of follow the sun model and, trying to optimize for workplace efficiencies and cost reductions efforts and stuff like that. And so I definitely got to travel my fair share. I was in India, the Philippines, like all around the world. And, it was pretty eye-opening experiences going to these places and really understanding what is a call center, what are these people doing, how are we locking down the physical sites that they're working in, as well as, limiting data exfiltration risk from people that are working there. And it was a really good eye-opening experience. So, but from the OT standpoint, that was kind of my first experience getting into it. So, we would go into the data centers and we're looking at like the building management systems and, looking at, the thresholds and, looking at how people have access to that system, what can they control remotely versus do they have to be on site? So that was really cool. Felt like I was really getting into that, very security realm of investigation. So that was pretty fun. So, but yeah, I know you have quite extensive experience in that. I don't know. Have you been to a lot of the data center world?
Yeah. So, I worked in, AT&T for a while. I was in there. We had a big data center outside of Dallas, and we had another one in outside of Seattle, in Bothell. And those two data centers, I think the one here was almost 200,000 square feet of raised floor data center. It was just a huge warehouse looking thing. I remember the coolest thing with there, obviously they had all the biometrics and all the things to get in the door. And this was, goes way back. But the really cool thing is, the ceiling, so the raised floor data center that AT&T had just built in Texas, and this was AT&T wireless. So it was it was like after the split, AT&T split off and turned into Southwestern Bell, and then it got bought by Singular Wireless, and then Singular merged with AT&T. Anyways, it kind of went this whole big circle. It went from AT&T and then went back to AT&T. But anyways, the data center, it was separate. So they had two data centers side by side. One was their like they bought Time Warner, so it was their cable offering. So they had like cable modem internet and that kind of data center. And then they had a separate one. Like neither of them had exterior, their nameplates on it or whatever. But the data center, the ceilings were like, I want to say 75 feet tall. And then when you open the raised floor, it was another 30 feet or something like that below. And they actually had little like rail cars that would drive, like for the fiber team, like the physical wiring team, they would drive the cars to run fiber back and forth because they were deploying fiber at the time. This goes way back, right? And they underneath, so like it's like a grid, so A2. You'd see that upstairs when you're on top, but underneath it was all lit and it would have all of those coordinates as well. So when you put in a ticket to, hey, I need fiber ran to this rack at A2, they would do it from underneath. And all of a sudden you just see fiber sticking up the bottom of your rack.
I have an appreciation for that. Back in college, I was an intern at like our computer center there. And so that was like my first, role in a very small scale data center, but going in there and running some of the fiber optics from the different racks. And I really appreciated going into some of these newer ones, specifically with Salesforce, like how clean they keep those racks. Like the one we went to, it was like a spider web, just a complete mess. And you're like, what is this going to? And, you're trying to be cognizant of like, all right, if I have to run this, I don't get cable burn and try to pull the cable and break it and do all that. But some of these other ones, it's like, it's a masterpiece with, the highways and the cable trays and everything that do. It's very impressive.
Yeah. I actually just got reached out to the other day. I did a project at a power plant. Oh, shoosh. That was probably 2016, I guess it was, I think. And we ran fiber they had different control rooms at this power plant, and we were running fiber between those and then also to remote locations. Well, this is in a coal-fired power plant, so it's not a clean environment. It doesn't have cable trays. It's hot because, sometimes they go next to the boiler, which can get, obviously thousands of degrees temperature. So we had to do this, Kevlar coated, shielded, cable, and we did MTP. So it had 48 strands in one fiber pool. So like you just put a termination on the end and then you fan it out to others. Well, we ran this, and the fiber, I want to say the fiber back then, it was, a couple $100,000 in just physical wire. That we got custom built in a factory in Virginia, and they brought it out on this giant spool. And, I think the longest run was like almost 1,000 feet. And then, so we ran it all, we got it all working, all this kind of stuff. Again, this was 2016. Well, this year, I think it was earlier this year, or it may have been the end of last year, they had a fire at the power plant. And when they were going through, the cables got cut, both from, some of them got burned, but some of them in the fire, in trying to put out the fire and kind of contain everything, they just basically cut all the wires going into the electronics room, because they didn't want it to, I guess, maybe spread across the wiring, etc. So they were trying to rewire everything, and they didn't have an understanding of how everything was and where everything went. So they're calling people like myself and my team that I don't even work at the company anymore, but they're trying to get the unit back up on the line, and they're trying to figure out where all the cabling goes and how it all worked and all that kind of stuff. So it's amazing. That was almost 10 years ago, I guess. And they're just now coming back and trying to help us to remember what was done so they can get back up and running. It just goes to show work that we do today. You don't know how long that thing will have an impact to previous, to the next version, down the road. So, some of the stuff will last for a long time, and others will be ripped out in a couple of years. You just never know.
Yeah. That's interesting. They're like, yep, come back 10 years later. Hopefully you have a really good memory of that exact cable that you ran. Maybe you wrote it down on a napkin or took a picture. Maybe we can leverage that.
Well, and luckily, it's weird how my brain works. Like, I'll meet you, and as soon as you tell me your name, I forgot it already. Like, I don't know what it is about me. I have to I have to meet you like 3 or 4 times, or say your name or something like that. I'll remember your face. I know who you are, but I can't remember your name for the life of me. But when it comes to stuff like that, IP, I can still remember IP addresses of servers at that plant today. Like, off the top of my head, I could tell you what the remote access server and the domain controller and the IP address and what its name is, and probably even remember my password. Hopefully it doesn't still exist, but if my account still existed, I maybe even remember the password. It's just like weird things that I remember, and I remember all of the wiring and how everything went and where it terminated and all that kind of stuff. So I was able to help them just in a quick phone call to give them a little bit of a head start on things as they were looking for the documentation that we created and where it existed, all that kind of stuff. But I'm like, oh yeah, that goes to here and this goes to there. And they're like, oh yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive. If it makes you feel any better, I'm the same as you, like with the names, like I hear it. I don't know if it's like the initial nervousness of like meeting a new face, but it'll just go in one ear out the other. And yeah, same thing. I'll recognize you, but I just have to wait for that opportunity to hear your name again. Hopefully someone else says it, so I don't have to ask you 3 more times.
Exactly. I just tell people up front, like, hey, I'm horrible with names. It is nothing. I remember who you are. I can remember where we met. I can remember what you do for a living. Like, I can remember that, you like biking in Moab and all those types of things, but I may forget your name. Be like, I don't remember your name. What's your name again? Like, some people get offended by it. Like, it's not intentional. It just is what it is. Especially when you meet so many people, I work really hard to try to remember that type of stuff. But again, it doesn't come naturally. So I have to tell myself, okay, this is Blake. This is Blake. This is Blake. This is Blake. Okay, now it's Blake. Now I'll never forget your name again, but it has to get registered in there before I can recall it.
Yeah, totally. That's the same for me. But yeah, the data center world was really, really cool. And especially, typical Salesforce is, those facilities were just pristine, next level, super high tech. So it was really fun to see that. But yeah, I definitely got into like the more OT space, I would say, or kind of more visibility into that from not really having much experience. But, we were looking at all the BMS configurations, and we're also looking at the temperature, humidity settings for the space. we're doing preventative maintenance checks on critical infrastructure like the chillers and the Cray units, and looking at the BMS the UPS systems and the backup generators and their BCP plans and all that stuff. So it was super cool, especially when you see it at some of these facilities that are just seeming like billions of dollars of equipment, and it's super impressive to see that. So that was kind of my my experience within like that third party risk, physical security realm. I also supported within like the Salesforce, a lot of our security compliance and GRC. So a lot of the testing we did on site, that would go into like our SOC 2 controls or ISO 27001. And then we'd work really closely with our customer trust team. So when we would have like, big customers that come and go, hey, like how are you getting assurance over these data centers or these critical third parties or sub processors? A lot of the time they would defer to the work we would do on our on-site assessments and our documentation, our SOC 2 reviews and all that type of stuff. So, but that was a really fun experience. So,
what's some of the bigger things that you found in those spaces that maybe people didn't think about, maybe even surprised you, whether it's in the OT or the IT or it's easy to think that those big companies have it all figured out. Like they've got big budgets, they've got big teams of people that do all these things, but that doesn't mean that they've fixed all the problems, right? So what are some of the things that maybe, and again, you don't have to call out a particular client, but what are some of the things that maybe you were surprised by that you saw that were still, vulnerable or gaping holes or things that they'd missed or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things where, if it's your house, for example, you walk by a problem all the time, you kind of just become blind or immune to it and you don't really realize that it's a problem. And it could be something as simple as like, even if you're not an experienced person, let's say you're not, this is your first time going into data center, like there might be things that you see off. You're like, oh, why does this critical hallway, not have a CCTV camera facing on it? And they're like, oh, that's a good point. We didn't wire one here. Okay. Well, you probably should have one here watching your UPS room. Or, let's test out your badge reader. Okay, like it looks like, my guest badge plus, my biometric is now somehow working on your door to get into this critical room. Like, are you testing that? Or, what's your, your profiles and permissions for your badge access? Is this like you've deployed, all doors to your guest badge and you haven't tested that? So there's instances like that where, if it was exploited maliciously, yeah, some of it could be pretty bad, but I think a lot of people just become immune to it because they see it every day and they don't, there's so many other things they're probably doing just like in our daily lives, right? You get busy and, I'll get to it, or, maybe it's not as critical. No one would actually get into that room. So it's not, risk-based approach in terms of dollars or time or effort. So you would see stuff like that occasionally.
Yeah. Well, and I found it can be also the assumption side of, well, somebody else has to know about that. Like it's too obvious. Like surely somebody's already put in a ticket or there's already a work order for that or somebody's already brought that up. But many times it's not, because either everybody's thinking the same thing, somebody else will take care of it, or somebody else will put in that ticket, or, again, like you just assume that things have been fixed. I was doing a walk down of a manufacturing facility, and they build, well, it doesn't matter. They build, a lot of stuff, and they've got like 8 lines, lines on their floor. And as we're walking around, I'm doing all this, and it wasn't a cyber thing that I found. And that's the other piece. When I'm doing assessments and walk downs, I'm going to find things that may be operational and not necessarily a cyber risk, but I'm still going to bring it up. It's just part of me. And again, maybe because I have this OT and operational background, I bring these things up. But one of the things that came up was they had, it's this huge, factory floor. And they've got 8 lines, like I said, and in between each line, I think it's 3 or 4 lines. They have this network cabinet, and it's up on, again, really tall ceilings, and they've got these pillars, and this network cabinet is like, I don't know, 20 foot or maybe less than that. It may be 15 foot, about the size of a basketball goal, up on this pole. And it's this half rack, and it's just mounted to this cabinet. And I was asking a question, like, what's in that cabinet? Cause there's like there's like 4 of them in this space. Like, oh, well, that's the networking cabinet. I'm like, okay, so what is it? What's it used for? I'm like, well, all the lines tie into that. Okay. Is there redundancy in there? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, are there redundant switches? No. Okay. Is there redundant power? What do you mean? I'm like, does it have 2 power supplies sourcing from different circuits? Or if I go trip a circuit, is that entire rack going down? There's no redundancy of any kind. Okay. And I'm like, so I can't, and it had black, darkened, tinted glass on the front. So you can't even see any of the indication lights on the switches. I'm like, are you doing any monitoring? No. Does anybody ever like walk by and check on those? No. Okay. I can't see them from here. I can't even tell what's in the cabinet, much less if there's an indication. I can't hear any audible alerts. So what happens if one of those switches fails? Well, these lines go down. Okay. Why are they 15 foot up in the air? Well, we're trying to keep them out of the way. Okay. Well, what if somebody hits them with a forklift? What? And we had just walked by a pillar and there was a TV mounted at about that height that was hanging from its HDMI cord because somebody hit it with a forklift. I'm like, remember that TV we saw back there? It's about the same height as that. So what if somebody hits that with a forklift? And it's little things like that nobody thought of. And this was a brand new plant. They were just building it out, greenfield. And nobody had thought to ask that or push back on the design because everything on the production line was redundant. But once it went back to the networking, it wasn't. And if that network switch went down, the entire production line went down because everything transmitted across that network layer, which meant that, the first zone back to however many, sections they had in each production line, they couldn't talk to each other. So it would just shut itself down. And they were like, oh, I'm like, again, this is not a cyber thing. It's got really nothing to do with cybersecurity other than the cyber risk is if I can hack that, switch and shut it down or whatever. Obviously I've got one place to go, but that's not the biggest concern here. My biggest concern is, you lose power, somebody hits it with a forklift or, there's a power supply fails in one of the switches and I don't know what's happening. So it just catches on fire because it overheats and nobody knows it happens until it's too late. And it's one of those things where you have to really empower your staff to be okay to say, stop. And even if I'm the junior person or I just walked onto the facility the first time, I can't assume that somebody's already thought of it. Right. And a lot of people are, especially if you just got hired or you're a junior person, you may be a little timid to say, hey, have you thought about this? Because they're like, oh, somebody's going to think I'm stupid. Same reason you don't raise your hand in the middle of class because you're afraid you might have a stupid answer or something. I'm not speaking for you. I'm speaking for myself. That's why I would sit in the back of the room and just take notes and let other people ask questions.
Yeah, totally. From their standpoint, it's like, having the N+1 redundancy is, very important. Like you said, whether it's a cybersecurity, someone can exfiltrate into there and control your box, your machine or whatever. That's one thing. But even from like a process is like, if this goes down, like you're not able to make money and that's bad. So you need to figure that out. But I agree. I mean, I'll point to another example here, kind of like you said, like the idea of a control, there's like good design controls and then there's bad design controls. So, again, looking at some of my on-site assessments, right? Like looking at some of our call centers, I remember one instance where, we were looking at their key management process, right? Like, how do you store keys, critical keys that get into this in case of power failure where, you don't have badge access, you don't have that like physical keys. And, you're like, all right, they walk you, they escort you over to the key management. Here's our key management process. And, it looks like, a rack of keys, kind of behind a glass thing, kind of similar to this, nicely on display. And, you're like, okay, well, who's watching the keys? Like, well, one, like the door is open, so you can just open it. I think it actually had the key in it. So it was like the key to open and unlock it was there. And then it's like, well, who's administering this? There's a sign in, sign out sheet. So does anyone here can just go grab whatever key they want, sign it out, bring it back, or maybe they don't even sign it out and you have no visibility here. Like, yeah, you can say you have a key management process, but is that a good key management process? Is it effective? Like, so there's definitely concerning things that we saw on that front for sure.
Yeah. And it's so easy to overlook things like that. Like, yes, I've got a process, but does it work? And sometimes you don't know. And it's easy to, and this gets back to the whole, I went to school for engineering and, I remember, I think it was even my freshman year of college. And, one of the professors, I want to say he was an electrical engineering professor. And he was explaining to us, like, you can design really intricate electrical designs, put a drawing together, all that kind of stuff. But if you can't take that to mechanical engineers and that they can actually build it, it doesn't matter how pretty your design is on paper. Like if it can't be built in reality, then it doesn't matter. Right. So sometimes it's really easy to overlook because you put it on paper, and then without testing that process and seeing it, it's really hard to know if it's going to work effectively. Right. So it's very easy as an outsider to come in and say, you have the key there and there's a sign-in sheet, but nobody's enforcing it. Like to see all of the issues. And you mentioned it earlier, like it's really easy once you're in it to ignore, or not ignore, but maybe not see how ugly the baby is, right? You created this thing, you spent a lot of time and pressure, time on it, and effort. And you may just not be able to understand how, where you missed the ball. And it's really easy as an outsider. And it's one of the reasons why consultancy is such a powerful thing, is I'm bringing all of the experience that I have from seeing thousands of sites, literally thousands of sites in all these different verticals, from, corporate data centers to buildings and, skyscrapers and power plants and manufacturing facilities and, buses and trains and, substations and a little bit of all those things. So when I walk in, I'm bringing all of that knowledge with me, and I can see things that I've seen in other places. So they stand out to me like a blinking red light. So when I walk in, it's like, oh, I've seen that. That's a problem. I've seen that be a problem. And you see it, and not you, but whoever the person is that did it, right? They're like, well, I don't get it. Like, because they haven't seen 50 other examples of why that was a problem. So to them, it's not that they're dumb. It's not anything like that. It's just that it's not the blinking light that it is to me when I walk in, because I've seen it that way and the issues that it caused and why. So it's easy for me to point out and say, ABC 1, 2, 3 in a few hours of a walk down, when I've got 15 people on their team walking with me, and every one of them, I can hear it and see it under their breath. It's just like, how did we not see, not that Aaron's so amazing. How did we not see that? Like, we walk by this every day. We've done this conversation 1,000 times and we never thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I've been there, done that. So, and I think as you said, like from a consultant, and, you have a very large and I guess in-depth experience in OT and all that, and the infrastructure, it's like, you're able to kind of like mentally benchmark, your clients and customers. You're like, yeah, I've been to this. This is what a good experience looks like versus this is not good. So you're able to really be able to, communicate what good looks like, what good design looks like, and help provide that guidance there, which is really good. And I think back to your point as well of like on paper, controls and processes and designs look great. But, that's where it's like you need to start doing the testing. So whether it's like incident response testing or business continuity testing, it's like, do some tabletop exercises. You have this 30-page document. Are the people still that are supposed to be involved? Are they still at the company? Or did they just get assigned to this document? They've never even looked at it. So when, shit hits the fan, so to speak, people aren't reading through 30 pages and go, I have no idea what to do. I'm so lost. This makes no sense. And, in terms of like a compliance audit or, what your customers want to see, yeah, maybe that 30 pages looks really good and sexy. But when it comes down to like, let's get actually things done and show results and test this out, like it's going to break down and it's not going to be good. So
100%. Speaking of tabletops, I love that analogy. And I think so many organizations and groups and teams and executives miss the point on compliance, but also B, like tabletop exercises. And I really see a tabletop exercise as, the fire drill is the analogy I usually give, right? Why do we do fire drills? It's not because, somebody wants to have to walk down 10 flights of stairs and go stand outside for 15 minutes and talk to all their, coworkers. It's because if a fire comes, you don't want anybody to have to wonder, where should I go? What should I do? Should I take the elevator? Like, what floor do I go to? Who is my point of contact? Where is the muster point? Like, you want everyone to already have done this multiple times. So it's just, they know what to do. They're just, or also when that floor warden says, hey, don't take the elevators, go down 10 floors, stop there, wait for more instructions. If you get there and that floor warden tells you to keep going, then keep going. Outside's the muster point, et cetera, right? So many organizations that I come in and see, they take a tabletop, they do it once a year. They only include their executives and maybe the managers. They're not including the actual boots on the ground that are actually, implementing and running the incident response plans or the disaster recovery plans. So they don't include all the right people. So they get this false narrative and false sense of security that they've gone through and they checked the box. And they don't actually get the benefit that they're looking for. instead of, so we've started doing these, what we call them auto tabletops. So we partnered with a company called ThreatGen, and we bring in and do these auto tabletops. And the benefit that it gives us is it's an annual license subscription. So the teams can use it. And I look at it more as like a training or even a team building exercise, right? So you can actually feed it. It's a local model, so it's not in the cloud. It runs locally on your machine, so it's not going anywhere. It's not leaving your network, so there's no worry about, exfiltrating asset information or vulnerability information or anything like that. But you can feed it things like your asset inventory, your disaster recovery plan, your incident response plan, and it'll go through that stuff. The difference than an old school traditional, tabletop which is static. And I've done them many times, and you walk in and you get to a certain place in the tabletop, and then somebody raises their hand. Yeah, that's not how we do things. Like that's not accurate. That wouldn't be how we would respond, or we have this control that mitigates that. And then you're just like, okay, well, we'll just continue anyways, knowing that. So just ignore that step, right? The difference with us is because it's using AI, we can actually say, time out, and adjust the tabletop on the fly and change the rest of the questions and all of the scenario based upon that. And then the other piece to it is just like a fire drill, when you run it, it's going to score you. So let's say you do it the first time and you got I don't know, out of 10, maybe you got a 7, whatever the number is. You can do that same exact exercise the following week, the following day, whatever. And in theory, you should have learned from your mistake, kind of like what we talked about with remembering somebody's name. About the second or third time I meet you, I'm more than likely going to remember your name. I'm not going to continue making the same mistake over and over again. So if those teams have learned from those, I didn't pull out the incident response plan. I didn't call, the supervisor in time, or I didn't, shut down the network, or whatever the step is. And once I learned from that, not only can you adjust your incident response plan documentation and let everybody know about it, you can also go through it again and see if you get a better score, right? So you're constantly improving, and it documents it. It's really powerful. But it's only as powerful if I only do it once, then it's just the same as a static one. But if I use it and say, hey, I want to do this monthly with my team, and I'm going to have all the way down to the people that are actually hands-on, that are actually doing the stuff, I want to make sure that they're part of it, because all of this is going to roll up and bubble up to improve my incident response plan, but also make sure that everybody, when an incident does happen, that they know what to do, because that's not the first time they've been looking at this piece of paper. Normally, incident response plans are, like you said, 30-page documents, and they sit in some file folder somewhere and, break glass in case of emergency, but nobody actually looks at it until it's in the moment. And then they've got 12 people looking over their shoulders, and they've got all this attention and pressure, and, the sky's falling, and people panic. Everyone does. Like, your blood pressure raises, and, it's just not the opportune time to figure it out.
Yeah, you're just you're shaving off years off your life with stress at that moment.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, that sounds really cool. I'll have to actually look into that. But yeah, I think, like you said, just testing everything out and making sure people are aware, and it's muscle memory, and it's super, super important. And not just doing, things for compliance. Like, that is an important thing, right? Like, we have, every company I've been at. So, and I guess I'll just bring it into this. So, like, when I was at Instacart, I built out the customer trust program, or customer security program. So, being on the receiving side of that, of, opposite of third party risk, is I was getting the customers coming to me and going, hey, we need to see your SOC 2, your pen test, your, pre-filled questionnaire. We want to know about your disaster recovery. We want to know about X, Y, and Z. And being able to have that stuff and, like, confidently be able to share it out is not, doing the security and process things for security and processes, not just to check the box and go, we got the audit stamp, or, hey, we're going to give this very fluffy, artificial document to a customer just to make them go away. Like, those things are important. And it's kind of one of those things, like, let's, we drink our own Kool-Aid. Like, this is our process. This is how we execute it. And we're happy to share it and educate people that we actually have good processes in place, and we secure your data. And, so that was my experience. But a lot of people I've seen, kind of do the compliance first, and then the security will process second.
Well, and I came from power utility where it's very compliance heavy, right? So there's a lot of regulatory compliance that goes in power generation, power transmission, distribution, et cetera, for obvious reasons, right? And I've also seen many organizations that do a really good job with it. All of them do a good job, but sometimes people don't understand the difference between compliance and security, right? I can have a really good, strong cyber secure environment and not meet compliance. And I can be 100% compliant and have vulnerable areas in my security posture, right? It's not a silver bullet. It's not one or the other. It's both, right? I can't just work on my compliance and then think that everything that needed to be done is in that compliance documentation, because it gets too stringent. So when they do compliance, they try to keep it pretty high level. They try to keep it fairly, open-ended so that you're not overly prescribing things that don't apply, to all parties. So they really have to make it where it fits the right model, right? So I've seen so many that really struggle with that the mixture between compliance and security, and why it's different, right? Why it can be hard. And to your point, you talked about checking that box, and it's really easy to go down the list and say, yeah, we do this. I've got a doc. Yeah, here's my piece of paper of my, my compliance, my incident response plan. But to your point that you said earlier, right? They haven't actually ran through it. They haven't tested it. They don't know if it's a good incident response plan, but it is one. It's just like, I can go to ChatGPT and tell it to create me an incident response plan. And I can print it out and put it in our SharePoint and label it and timestamp it and, all that kind of stuff. So check the box. I've got an incident response plan. But what's the point of it? If it's not accurate, if nobody knows how to use it, if it hasn't been tested, it hasn't been validated, like all those things, and I think companies are getting better. Even looking at cyber insurance, like cyber insurance has changed so much over the past 5-10 years, where, in the beginning, people were using cyber insurance instead of the cybersecurity. Like, oh, I just got an insurance policy. I don't need to, actually deploy controls. I'll just insure in case somebody breaks in. And I think now, obviously, the cyber insurers have gotten wise and said, yeah, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
If you can't prove that you have multi-factor authentication and you have firewalls and you have segmentation and you have endpoint protection, and if you can't prove that you have those things, then I'm not insuring you. And if I do insure you and I find out you didn't have those things, then I'm not going to pay the claim. Like, those are, it's compliance, but it's compliance in proving that you've done the due diligence that you said you were going to do. And it's not just a piece of paper. It's an actual incident response plan that works, not just something I created or grabbed from, I went to EY and said, hey, give me an incident response plan that I can implement. And they just, copy and paste, right? That's not what they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the compliance aspect that you said is important. For example, like, having a SOC 2 or having, meeting PCI or, ISO 27001, those are really good, from a company perspective in terms of like sales enablement and, trying to generate revenue off of those and showcasing it. But it's one of the things where it's like, design the documentation with your current environment in mind and how your current processes work, and then fill out the documentation. And if you're doing that well, those things will satisfy the requirements. Maybe some very specific things that you might need to add a little language in for PCI or, a scoping thing. But for the most part, it's like, hey, we have an incident response process and we're executing and we're training and we're doing it. And it's going to satisfy, 5 different control frameworks for these attestations and external audits. Great. Everyone wins and we can sell the business better. And so those things are definitely important. It just, I think a lot of people, you said nowadays with like ChatGPT, for good or for bad, like, create me this policy. And then an auditor comes in and is like, yep, ship shape. You looks like you have a great policy and nothing to look here. No deficiencies, no findings, and have a great day. See you next year.
Right. Which, again, not to beat down on ChatGPT. If you don't have an incident response plan, you should absolutely use AI tools to help you create one. That said, you need to take it and customize it to your environment and make sure it works and make sure it's not missing things, because ChatGPT, these AI models are good at what they do. But there's no way, unless you're feeding, an open AI model, all of your proprietary and vulnerable information, which I highly don't recommend that you do, because then it knows all about all of the things. And, there's all sorts of risks behind that. So, but again, that being said, there's no reason why you can't have it build a very generic, high level, incident response plan to start with. Like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can find consultancies like, again, Morgan Franklin, we do this all the time. Like, we can come in and help you. There's lots of folks that can help you. You don't have to start from scratch. But at the same time, you still need to customize it to your space and make sure, my business is different than your business. So yes, I could give you a copy of my incident response plan, but it's not going to necessarily fit your business. Like, your crown jewels, the things that are important to your business, where those risk factors live, all that's going to be unique to your environment, right? So we need to make sure that the right people are at the table to raise those questions of, where are the crown jewels? Where are the most important assets? Like, what is our business process? Like, where are the things that we need to make sure that we can get to and respond with, and that's where working with third parties, working with consultancies, but even that, just making sure even if I came in, Aaron has been to all these different places, and, yes, I can help you get a long way, but I'm still going to need people on the ground that know the process and have done it to make it complete. Like, as good as I am, as good as you are, like, we can't come in blind and say, here, I know how to fix all your stuff. Like, there's some, investigation time, and interview time that we need to have to really completely understand your business and how to make sure that you're covering all the bases.
Yeah. And I think like you said, like, going into the AI topic a little bit, it is such a great starting point and tool. Like, if you're not versed in one of those areas of, hey, create me a policy or an SOP, great. It'll spit something out. And then, like you said, whether you're capable or not, or you hire someone else, go interview stakeholders, interview your security person, interview your BCP person, interview this person. And then you can kind of tune it, like you said, specific to like your crown jewels, your processes, your people, your technology. But I mean, it's, I don't know if you have any specific thoughts on AI and where it's going, but it is a pretty good, like, hey, I have a meeting, but I'm going to prompt this thing really quick to build me an outline. Once I'm done with that, I can go, spend a few minutes in between meetings for the next thing and tune it. And I found it's pretty game changer in just getting some threads and brainstorming ideas going, and then can take it and run with it from there. But I don't know if you're finding some good use cases for it for yourself.
Well, yeah, for sure. It is definitely game changing. And if you're not using some AI tools in your day-to-day operation, then you're missing the ball, right? That being said, obviously from a cyber perspective and an organizational perspective, you need to be careful. DLP, you don't want your data getting into the cloud that shouldn't be there. But that can go with training. Like, anything that I'm putting into AI, is not anything that somebody couldn't find on the internet already, right? It's general information. It's a logo. It's a brand name, things like that. I'm not putting my crown jewels or my asset inventory or anything like that into a public model. We do have some local models that we use for things like that, internal tools, and we do some automation and we create reports, and we'll do a lot of that stuff like tabletop type stuff, right? So I talked about the auto tabletop that we do. We also do some stuff with like asset inventory and doing assessments where we take a little device and we plug it into your network and it gets broadcast information. It's not scanning or doing anything like that. And then we take that and use AI tools, again, on-prem, our models, not going in the cloud, like no commingling of data with other clients or anything like that, right? And there's a lot of power in those things. But even to your point, just as an individual user, taking notes, like I go to locations and I'll handwrite notes on things, and, I know what it means, but sometimes it's really not super clear, or I'll forget. Like if I look at my notebook from 5 years ago and I just look at the notes, sometimes I don't necessarily understand what I was noting about, right? So what I've started doing now, especially on important things, is I'll take those notes, and then when I'm out of the meeting, I'll take time and I'll go through, I'll upload pictures of those notes to ChatGPT. Again, nothing in the notes is proprietary. There's no, again, I'm not talking about, critical IP addresses or anything like that, high level conceptual type things. And then I'll go in and dictate into ChatGPT as I'm looking at the notes and saying, oh, this is what I was thinking about here. This is what this section is for. This is what, so giving it some context around what my notes were. So that way, then it creates me a summary. So it then takes all my handwriting, converts it to, text, and then puts my summary on it. So now I have a summarized page of the notes and all the things and what they were for in a legible thing that I could give to you, and you could actually make sense of it to some point. It's a really powerful thing to be able to do. And I just started doing it, and it was like life changing to me, because I've got all these notebooks down there, and I can look back and some of the stuff makes sense, and some of them's like, man, I don't remember what that was about, because I don't have the context of what I was listening to in the meeting that I wrote that sentence out for, right?
Yeah, no, it's super, super handy, just like you said. Is there a which one of the engines is been your favorite, or you found to be the best for your use cases? Or do you use a blend of it? Do you you start with one, move over to another, try it through there? How do you do it?
So I use them all, or not all, but many of them. I probably default to OpenAI ChatGPT the most. I like the projects that it does. Obviously, it's not great at everything. You don't want to usually create images from it or anything like that. But it's all of them are getting better. So, Claude is supposed to be good with like copy, the noting stuff I was just talking about. Grok is really good at the research stuff, but they're all good. It's just a matter of, so sometimes I'll do the same tasks on 3 different chats and just to see which output I like better. Other times I'll actually let's say I'll put it into OpenAI and ChatGPT, and I'll take the output and drop it into Grok, and take the output and drop it into, Claude, and just to see, okay, now what do I get from it? And are there any other enhancements from it? Right. So, the template for, an SOP or incident response plan or disaster recovery plan, all those things are so, their language, they're learning from others that have put them in there, and you can get as specific as you want, again, without putting proprietary information in there. But it's amazing how they may say it a little bit different. And it's kind of like getting the opinion of 3 different people. And like, they all say basically the same thing, but there may be a few like, oh, wow, that's an interesting way to do it. So like doing it through all 3 of them, like there'll be little nuggets that you can pull out that I like this better out of the ChatGPT one. I like this better out of the Claude one, and this one out of the Grok one. Right. So, they're all very close and they're good at different things. But yeah, I spend a lot of time in Claude, and, little things like taking a contract. Let's say it's some, generic contract you have to sign for whatever. Like, you can take it in there, you can drop it into GPT, and then you can just say, summarize it. Like, tell me the things that I should be concerned about. Is there anything that I should be, interested or really dive into? Not that it's going to do everything for you, but what section should I really read through and make sure I understand before I sign this contract? Right. Yeah. Little things like that I've read that. I've got a real estate license, and I've read thousands and written thousands of contracts for real estate, but still it's a legal contract, right? So I've read all that legal verbatim, all that type of stuff. But still, it's just mind numbing when there's 30 freaking pages of it, and it's always small print, and it's all, but putting it into something like that really can help you kind of summarize things. I'll tell you one, and my wife will laugh at me, and it has nothing to do with cybersecurity, but I'll share it as a fun aside. My wife and I were in a disagreement the other day, and I was trying to explain something to her, and it like we were just talking past each other, like we were not able to communicate well. So I came in here in my office, and I dictated, like, this is what happened. This is where we disagreed. This is what I was trying to say. This is what she said. And I feel like we're talking past each other, but this is what I'm trying to say. And again, I'm not typing, I'm dictating it. And it created this response that was like, when I read it, it was like, that's what I was trying to say. I don't know why the words couldn't come out of my mouth that way, but so I sent it to her, and I prefaced it by saying, I did this through ChatGPT. I wasn't trying to pretend like I created the words, but they were my thoughts. and dictated through exactly what I said. But because of the way that ChatGPT was able to kind of word it, it made her not be defensive about it. And she was able to see my perspective, and saw that I understood her perspective as well. And man, it was life changing. And but using tools, and it feels like a cheat. And kind of what I told her was, I said, it's like any tool, like, you shouldn't overuse it, but it's a tool that is it's available to us. So why wouldn't we use it? Whether it's at work with your kids, you can do things like, I've got a 3-year-old kid or a 5-year-old kid, and, I want to, they're doing fractions or whatever, you could say, hey, give me 10 questions that I can ask my kid to see if they're good at it, and let it do things like little things like that have nothing to do with cybersecurity and maybe nothing to do with your job, but you can do, funny things like that to start meetings and summarize notes and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing what you can do with it and make you more efficient in your roles.
Well, that's a really good example. I'm going to keep that in my back pocket next time my wife and I get into it. I think what's interesting is it's, probably just from like an AI, it's, taking the feelings and emotions out of the human. I need to win this debate. I need to win this argument. I need to win this point, and translating it into, without that bias, without that feeling, not saying there's not bias there, but like the feeling of emotion or communication and things like get lost in translation in those moments. So that's really good. I'm going to keep that up my sleeve, but yeah, my example of using it recently is we had a claim for mold water damage at our house. And same thing, like you said, we get us, hey, what's our deductible? What is all of our information, our contract with our insurance? Ran it through GPT to, to hold my hand, talk to me like I'm 5 years old. Like what is the best case scenario here? So it was really helpful to like break it down of, like you said, like here's the good, here's the bad, here's how you should approach this. So yeah, saved me much time, much stress, and definitely made that process smoother for me. So
I've seen a lot of organizations that are doing like their own in-house custom, AI models, right? Local language, because they want their employees to be able to use it, but they obviously don't want, proprietary and information in the cloud. Some organizations are completely blocking ChatGPT, but it's not going to stop people from using their own personal devices, their phones, etc. You can obviously train them and tell people not to do things, and people make mistakes. But giving them the tools is the right answer, right? So if you can have those tools, if you don't want them using, the free ones or the ones in the cloud, then give them an alternative, right? It's like, you tell a kid not to ever drink and you don't tell them why, as soon as that kid, that's why the preacher's kid's usually the worst kid, right? They never got to do anything. And as soon as they get a little bit of freedom, they go over the deep end on it, right? Same thing with, don't have, make sure you keep the door open and, keep a distance between you and a girl, like, all that type of stuff, right? And as soon as you get that alone time, like you're just going straight after it. Cause if they don't want me to do it, it must be really good. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, no, I think like you said, companies should embrace it, set up policies, set up the guidelines, like allow people to explore it, test it, have fun with it. But like you said, like limit what the risk is, bring it in house, have your self-sustained environment, limit what people are doing with it. But like you said, if you try to say, no, it's bad, you can't use it, like people are going to find ways to do it. And chances are they're going to put themselves in or the company more at risk because maybe they're not educated enough or they're just doing silly stuff on the side. So that would be my feedback and guidance and what I see. Hopefully people embrace it along the way because I don't think it's going anywhere.
No. And, it is, everybody's talking about how AI is going to, displace jobs and things like that. And although I do think that there's some of that, there'll be some low level, entry level type roles. I don't think they go away. I think they just turn into something else. Like, you look at the factory floor that we, from 50 years ago, and it was people, and it's like we talked about earlier, right? But now it's automation, it's robotics, it's things like that. It doesn't mean that you don't need humans. Those humans just have to do different things. Like now they're controlling the robots. They're validating things. They're tuning. They're calibrating. They're checking systems. They're doing different tasks. They're not just, hammering a rivet, right? The robot's doing that stuff. The robot's doing the welding. The robot's doing the dangerous stuff. Then the human can just validate things are in there. They're working as performed, and that human can do more tasks now, right? They can do more things. So when I look at AI, it's that, like, how can I enhance I don't have to do the boring, mundane things that I don't want to do. Writing a report, prime example. I don't want to write a report, but I can tell you exactly what I want to say, and I can dictate it. Like, I know what I want it to look like. So I can, a funny story. When I was at Big Four Consulting, I would be able to, I can write on a whiteboard. It's like, I'm like beautiful mind. Like I can write forever. I can draw like all of these things, but turning that into a PowerPoint is not my strength. Like it's like, I can't do it. Like I can, but it's not going to look right now. So back then they would take entry level people, so seniors, and they would bring them in and they would schedule a meeting with me, and they would bring out their cell phone and they would record the audio. And then they would ask me like whatever they needed to write a presentation or a report on or whatever. And I would draw it all out on the board as I'm talking. So I'd have pictures and diagrams and all the things. And then when the meeting was over, they would take the audio, they would take the pictures, and then they would use that to manually create a PowerPoint. So now I do the exact same thing, but instead of the entry level, 2 people that are doing it and manually creating it, I dictate it to ChatGPT, and then I put it into another platform that creates a PowerPoint. I can create a PowerPoint in 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, it's life changing from that perspective. Yeah, I think back to your point too on that is like some people do get fearful of it. Like you said, there might be some shifts in jobs and what that looks like. But I think overall, like if you look back in time, like this might be like one of those transitions with like phones. Like, you went from working 9 to 5 brick and mortar job, you went home, maybe you had a life. Or now where it's like, you have your cell phone, you have, the Internet of Things, everything is talking to you, work it can talk to you all hours of the day. So you're, arguably working longer and more. And same thing with like, AI, it's like, okay, maybe you're going to work, more in a different aspect or a different capacity, or pick up a different skill set and take some of the mundane, low-hanging fruit that, like you said, just translating something. Like, I already wrote this out, I freehanded it, stencil it. I don't want to make a PowerPoint. This is really good at doing that, and it gives me time to go focus on this, actually high risk, impactful thing versus just, something that anyone can really do at this point. And I think along the lines as well with AI is, as you're prompting it. So for people like us in this field, like we have experience. So it's like we kind of know what the output should look like, or our desired output. But like, let's say you don't know about it and you start prompting it, and you're reviewing the output, and you're going to be learning this stuff along the way. I feel like it's almost like Google searching without less of the sponsorships, ads, all the fluff. Like, you can get to answers, not to say you have to trust everything 100% of the time, like you said, but like you're going to be reading the content. It's going to be pulling it together quicker, faster. You're going to be reading that and absorbing the information in a nice, uniform, dissectable, speak to me like I'm 5 years old and educate me. So it's like, there's a lot of learning opportunities as you're prompting this with new content, which I find really fascinating.
100%. Like I really feel that Googling or search engines are kind of dead.
Yeah. I don't use Google anymore. I Grok, I OpenAI,
Yep. I use Perplexity. So Perplexity has access to all of them. So if I'm looking, let's say that I did it the other day. I was looking for a podcast studio in San Francisco, because I'm going to RSA next week. And I was saying I may want to do a drop-in and record a podcast episode while I'm there. So instead of Googling and trying to find all that kind of stuff and read the websites and seeing where they are, I put it into Perplexity. And I said, okay, I'm going to be in San Francisco. I'm going to be close to the Moscone Center. And I'm looking for a podcast studio that's within, maybe a mile of there, that has, this, and this. And I kind of put in the criteria, and then I just did it. and then it came back with like 3 of them in row, the closest one first, what their pricing was, like what services they offered, all that kind of stuff. And I didn't have to look at 15 ads or find 10 down that was the right one that was closest, because it didn't trend in Google. So even though it was the closest and best one, it's on the second page and I didn't see it. Like, it does all that stuff for me. And it's just looking at the data. Like, it's life changing when you know how to use it and what scenarios to use it, instead of, having to go the old ways and do it Google and then go to click on everyone and then try to find the right page that has the information I'm looking for. And then 5-6 clicks later, and then go back to another one and do the same thing. Like, it would take you 30-45 minutes to do that information. And now you can just do it at the drop of a hat. Same thing with booking travel, with finding hotels, with finding flights. Like, you don't have to go to multiple sites. You don't have to go to Google Flights. Like, you could do all this stuff and just give it the information and let AI at least do the first round of searching and narrow it down, so you're spending less time doing these things.
Yeah. And then you can export it too. So instead, like you said, going Google and then putting your Google sheet and tracking it and comparing, it's like, nope, I want this in a PDF or, Excel format exported so I can compare, contrast it. I can also send it directly to the person I'm trying to coordinate this trip with or whatever. So it's super, big game changer there. One thing I wanted to touch on outside of the AI and some of the security realm, and I don't know how we're doing on time here, but one thing I'm passionate about, and I believe you are as well, and I don't feel like this is maybe discussed enough in the field, but it's just like the mental wellness, health, we work in this stressful field. I'm not saying that this is the only stressful field, but it's stressful, right? What do you do to, I guess, prolong your lifespan, de-stress yourself, stay in the game? Like, that's something I'm always fascinated with. And I haven't really chatted with enough people about that, but like, what do you do to stay grounded and mentally sharp, physically sharp, like in the game for as long as possible? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So for me, I had this journey in my life. I was, working in a job, great job. I was 350 pounds, over 100 pounds more than I am now. I'm a big guy. I'm, 6'2", 235. But, I was same height except 350 pounds, right? I had back problems and heartburn and pre-diabetic and all the things. Since then I've changed and I eat different. I work out all the time, and I don't work out like, I've done CrossFit and I've done, mud runs and competitions and marathons and climbed mountains and done crazy, 14ers in Colorado and done all sorts of things. But to answer your point, and why do I do that? Like, I do it because that every day I ruck. Rucking is, if you've never heard of rucking is, you basically walk with a backpack, right? It came out of military. I did not serve, but many of my friends did. And rucking is something, you do in the military. It's a backpack with weight on it, and you walk, not just, leisurely, but you walk, with a purpose, pretty fast. And then that weight helps you, you get the benefits of a run without the physical breakdown of the impact of your joints, et cetera. Right. So I've signed up for the past 4 years to do 1,000 miles a year. So I've rucked over 4,000 miles in the last 4 years, and I do it all around the world. I take it with my backpack that I carry is a Go Ruck. So I've done it in London and Japan and Canada and Mexico and all the places, on the beach, in the cold, in the snow, in the heat, you name it. Right. And why do I do that? I do that because it starts my day off, right? It really helps me to level set. I've done a hard thing. I usually do it first thing in the morning. So many times it's 5 o'clock in the morning. In San Francisco, it'll be 5 o'clock in the morning, which for me, because I'm in Central Time Zone, it's really only 7 a.m. because I'm used to that. But, I ruck a lot. I do a lot of reading. All the things on my book back there, they're not just props, right? I'm reading things constantly. I'm going to, coaching seminars and webinars, and, I'm constantly learning, and not just in cybersecurity, public speaking and mindset and, personal health and all the different things, because to your point, like, you never shut it off now. right? To your point, like I work from the time that I get up, I'm checking emails and, you know, my boss may send me a message at 7 o'clock at night and I'm probably going to respond to it. But because of that, I need to make sure that I have balance in my life. And balance does not mean equal. It just means that there is some balance, right? You know, the scale balances a little bit. Like sometimes it's 60-40, sometimes it's 80-20, sometimes it's 100-0. But you can't run at rev limiter constantly or you will burn out, right? So, you know, taking time, every day I schedule a lunchtime. That doesn't mean that people don't sometimes, you know, schedule a meeting over my lunch, but I carve out that time so that I remember, especially working from home, to walk away from my desk and go eat, right? Sometimes I'll grab food and I'm sitting here at my desk on a call or whatever. And it's okay to shut this off and go walk away for 15 minutes and talk to my wife and then come back to work, right? It's okay to step away. And when we go to the office, we used to go to lunch and we're talking with friends and all the things. It's really easy to just get in the groove and, you know, work nonstop all day long. So for me, it's a mixture of fitness. It's a mixture of, you know, whether it's meditation, you know, grounding, you know, obviously hanging out with friends and, you know, I do jujitsu, you know, a lot of things like that I'm 47 years old. I do jujitsu. I work out every day, many times twice a day. You know, I do a lot of physical things because to me, it's amazing how much more energy I have when I go do those things than when I just wake up, have coffee and don't do anything physical. Cause then I'm like tired at 2 o'clock and I'm like passing out. It's exactly the opposite of what you would think, but for me, it's true.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. Like I like to start my day off with some exercise and, you know, today was one of those days where I did some walking, not as much as I want, not as physical exertion. So definitely a lot more caffeinated, but yeah, you know, I just feel a little bit slower, a little bit more tired. But yeah, for me, I love the sense of like fulfillment of like, I did that hard thing today and like everything else is seemingly easier or less stressful or gets to me less. And then on top of that, just from like a mood and mental, like, you know, I'm less agitated. I'm less, you know, less stressed. I'm not going to yell at my neighbor or someone because like I've had a rough day. So for me, it's definitely a big distressor. And, you know, like the competitive aspect. I know you mentioned like jujitsu, like I don't personally do that, but it's like, I like competing. Like I use, you know, do cycling, triathlons, like racing. And for me, like I use apps like Strava where it's like, oh, who was the fastest on this route today? Oh, it hopefully would be better be me. But I love that. And just, I think it just, like you said, grounds me. It keeps life in perspective. Like the job is fun, but it's, you know, this is a part of me. It's not my identity. And there's definitely more to it that keep me in the game longer, keep me happy, healthy, and, you know, connected with my wife, my kids, and my community. So
100%. Yeah. I mean, the other thing obviously is, where I met Blake was shooting. So this evening I'm going to Staccato. They're having a meeting tonight. So kind of a meetup type thing. So I'm going out there in a little bit after this call on Friday. So, you know, shooting and I love that you brought this up because I think so many people don't focus on this and it's really important. The irony is the more that you pour into yourself and do these other things outside of work, the better you show up at work, right? The more energy you have, the more clarity you have, like all of these things that you have one physical body that you're in. And the better you take care of it, and take care of it doesn't mean sit on the couch and do nothing. That's not taking care of your body. Taking care of your body means moving it. It doesn't mean you got to go run a marathon. It doesn't mean you have to rock or do jujitsu or any crazy stuff like that. Just move your body. Like it can be just walking. It could be going and standing in the grass and grounding yourself. Like it can be really simple things that have profound impacts on how you show up in all things. Like you have more compassion for your spouse, for more compassion for your kids, your coworkers. Like you have more clarity around looking at these things because you're not as groggy, you're not grumpy, like all those types of things. So find something that works for you. And again, it doesn't have to be extreme. This isn't about weight loss or having a six pack or doing extreme sports or anything like that. Happens to be what works for me. I'm just crazy like that. Sounds like Blake is too, just a little bit different. He's going to go, you know, jump boulders in Moab next week. So, he's got his own version of crazy. You know, I'll be dodging homeless people in downtown San Francisco while I'm rucking at 5 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, that'll be my extreme sport.
Yeah. Yours arguably sounds more dangerous than mine.
Irony. I probably shouldn't say this, but you know, usually what I do when I go to San Francisco, cause I can't carry anything on the plane, I usually buy like a very legal pocket knife. and I'll Amazon it to me there. I'll pick it up and I'll carry it with me just in case. And then I just throw it away at the end of the week, right? Because I don't, I can't get it back on the airplane because I don't check a bag. But, just that little bit of thing, or I'll carry like a, set of keys or something, because it's pretty crazy down there in San Francisco these days.
Yeah, I used to live Soma, Tenderloin area. I think we talked about this last time, but yeah, it was it was not my cup of tea. Saw a lot of troubling things. Do not miss that area. So
yeah, it's a gorgeous city. I love the weather. I'm always excited to be there, but every time I get there, it's just like, man, how have they let this place get so bad?
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, what's the call to action for folks that want to, kind of check you out or anything like that?
Yeah. Mainly stay active on LinkedIn. So you can look me up, just Blake Hoge on LinkedIn. Happy to connect, happy to do one-on-ones, chat, just get to know people, share ideas. So just look me up and happy to have some more people in my network. So
yeah, absolutely. Definitely check out Blake. Awesome dude. Come to one of our cyber shootout events. You'll probably see him there, rocking and kicking tail on the range as well. So
do we have another one in Austin coming up? I know you guys have one in Las Vegas, right? For was it Black Hat? Or
yeah, we've got one coming up for Black Hat in Vegas, and then we'll have another one in the fall, October. It's another thing I'm talking about at Staccato today is setting dates on that. But yeah, there should be one in October-ish, late September, early October, here in Austin. So definitely reach out. If you want to hear about how that goes and you don't want to just hear biasly from me, you can reach out to Blake and he'll tell you, because he's been to them and he's seen and had some fun at those things. So
yeah, super fun. Bring your wallet in case you want to buy some new goodies, but yeah, can't speak highly enough. Super fun. Great way to build connections and, get away from the slide decks for a little bit. So highly encourage it.
Absolutely. And more of that, working on your mindset and getting away from things and decompressing. Like that's part of the reason why we do these types of things. I had a happy hour last night that you aren't able to make, which it's fine. We'll have another one, but that's why we do these things, right? We're a big community and we can help each other. You never know how that person that you just met is going to help you or introduce you to somebody, or, maybe they're hiring, kind of like what you talked about when your friend went to the separate company and then brought you in. Like those connections are priceless, right? Our brand, our personal, our integrity, who we are, like we're one big community. And the wonderful thing that I love about this community is it seems like most people are wanting to help others, right? So if you show up with integrity, people want to help you. They want to, right? If you show up and you're taking advantage of that, then yeah, nobody's going to want to help you. But if you're willing to give as much as you're asking for, people will give you the shirt off their back. I've seen it 1,000 times. So, if you have questions, if you're looking to get into the industry or you're struggling with something, you have a question, like anybody that I've had on my podcast, myself, like reach out, because everybody I have them on here for a purpose. It's because not only are they capable, very, very smart and successful, but also the reason they've got there is because they're willing to help people, because they've been helped. We've all been helped by someone along the way. Most of us, many, many people. And we have stories. I have war stories I could tell you with mentors and friends and colleagues and bosses and coworkers and all these great, amazing stories of people, because it's all people. Like all business is a people business. Like it doesn't matter for cybersecurity, you're the janitor or the CEO. All business is a people business. So remembering that, whether you need help or remember also when you get into those positions to remember the people that helped you. So when people are asking you for help, you're willing to do it as well.
Yeah, I love that. I completely agree. And I love the community out here in Austin. I feel like there's tons of people out here, some really good people in the network. So if you guys are on the fence of moving out to Austin, highly encourage it. Definitely a great community. So
100%. You get to go to fun shooting events and happy hours and jiu-jitsu events and all the things that we're doing out here.
Yeah,
sounds like Blake needs to lead a cycling cyber event. So
yeah, maybe I'll get that set up. So definitely be fine. Try not to get anyone hurt, but I think we can have some fun with that too.
Yeah, maybe we can get Lance Armstrong to show up.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, dude. Hey, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend, sir. Always a pleasure to speak.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right, man.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.